Hey guys, tonight we're entering the hushed halls of a medieval convent, stone walls lit by candlelight, robes rustling against the floor, and the faint smell of lavender mixed with, well, something slightly less holy. You're walking behind a line of nuns as they make their way to evening prayer. Everything is quiet, too quiet. One sister flinches with every step, clearly praying her stomach stays still. Another tightens her jaw, eyes darting as though something embarrassing might escape her, and not through her mouth. Welcome to a place where silence isn't just golden, it's sacred, and any noise, even the kind your intestines make, could mark you as less than holy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there? I always love seeing just how global our sleepy little tribe really is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just stepped into the 12th century, and believe it or not, your biggest worry tonight isn't plague or heresy, it's digestion. Specifically, trying not to show any signs that your mortal body exists, especially through sound or smell. Because here in this convent, surrounded by pious women and stern abbesses, there's an unspoken rule that no one dares break. Asterisk, asterisk, no farting, asterisk, asterisk. Not officially, of course. You won't find it in the 10 Commandments, or even in most Rule of St. Benedict copies, although we'll circle back to that little Latin loophole later. But make no mistake, this is a place where bodily control is tied directly to spiritual virtue. And to break wind is to risk breaking your image as a holy vessel of restraint. The convent smells mostly of beeswax candles, damp wool, and boiled leeks. The leeks are problematic. So is the cabbage, and the beans, dear God. The beans. They're everywhere. Protein for the poor, meatless meals for the pious, and absolute asterisk carnage asterisk for the gut. You take your place at the refectory table. Dinner is eaten in silence, of course. A single sister stands at a pulpit, reading scripture aloud while the others chew with the care of someone diffusing a bomb with their teeth. You can hear your own heartbeat and someone's stomach lets out the softest traitorous gurgle. A few heads turn, just for a second. Then, back to chewing. No one acknowledges it, but the fear is real. You'd think someone just dropped a relic. See, in this sacred space, your body is supposed to be invisible. You pray with it, kneel with it, mortify it, maybe even flagellate it. But you never, ever acknowledge that it digests. At night, things get riskier. The dormitory is lined with straw-stuffed mattresses on wooden frames. The nuns sleep in their habits. Removing garments is frowned upon, especially if you share a room with 20 others. You crawl into your bed and pull the thin blanket over you. Somewhere down the hall, someone shifts. Another coughs softly, then asterisk asterisk pffffft asterisk asterisk. You freeze. It's the smallest, squeakiest, most unfortunate sound. A ripple of silence, one nun sighs, just loud enough to be audible. It could mean many things. Disappointment, empathy, judgment, or just a bad night's lentils. No one laughs. Of course not. This isn't a college dorm. This is a house of God. Still, you feel the shame radiate from the poor soul who let it slip. She'll be doing extra penance tomorrow. Maybe 2 rounds of scrubbing chamber pots, or peeling turnips in silence while everyone else practices chant. Historians still argue whether specific rules about bodily noise were ever officially codified for nuns. Some believe it was more about the culture of control, of making women suppress every part of themselves to fit into a mold of holy womanhood. Others point to obscure writings, like the asterisk uncreenwis asterisk, a 13th century guide for ancestresses, that advised spiritual women to avoid foods that inflame the belly. Not because of sin, per se, but because inflamed bellies make noise. And noise is a gateway to chaos. You roll over, careful not to rustle your bedding. Someone coughs again twice. It might be a signal, a kind of coded communication, like Morse code, but holy. The convent is filled with unspoken understandings. When it's okay to breathe heavily, when to cough to cover someone else's noise, and when to clench for dear life and pray the Blessed Virgin grants you strength. It's weirdly comforting, in a way, a shared struggle, an invisible sisterhood of silence and dignity. And yet, underneath it all, a deep and often painful truth lingers. This isn't just about piety. It's about suppression of the body, of the self, of the sheer, natural reality of being human. But don't worry, you'll survive this. Maybe just remember, if your stomach starts to bubble, pray silently to St. Elmo. Light a candle to St. Lucy. And whatever you do, don't let it slip during matins. The day begins before the sun dares peek over the horizon. You are woken not by a rooster's crow, but by the tolling of a small brass handbell, its chime thin and cold as the stone floor beneath your bare feet. You rise, bleary-eyed, into the chill of the dormitory. A sea of silhouettes does the same, each nun moving in near silence like a ghost already halfway to sainthood. And so begins another day, under the ** rule of silence ***. You shuffle behind the others, robes brushing faintly as the procession makes its way down a long corridor toward the chapel. You aren't allowed to speak. Not yet. Probably not until supper. Unless you have special permission, or someone dies. Even then, you might just be expected to nod solemnly. This silence isn't just tradition, it's theology. A discipline, a sacrifice. You feel it pressing against your temples as you move, like invisible hands cupping your head, demanding reverence. But it's also incredibly awkward when your stomach has other plans. Loud ones. You try to breathe shallowly as you settle into a wooden pew. No cushion, of course not. This place isn't about comfort. A narrow window lets in blue dawn light. Somewhere outside, the world is waking up with birdsong and barking dogs. Inside, you feel the tremor of someone's internal organs staging a quiet protest. Maybe it's you. Hard to say. The reader's voice begins slow, melodic Latin that drifts through the air like incense. But your brain is stuck on digestion. You didn't eat much yesterday. Bread crust, a little turnip mash. Still, it churns, it bubbles, it conspires Across the aisle, one sister subtly shifts. She presses her hand to her side. You recognize the posture, the holy clench. Everyone knows it. See, the rule of Saint Benedict, written round the 6th century and widely used in medieval monastic life, doesn't say anything specific about farting. But it has a lot to say about speech, about humility, about modesty, and about restraint. So over centuries, communities like this one developed unspoken expectations. Silence became more than just a practice, it became identity. A noisy body, even one struggling quietly with digestion, threatened that image. The ideal nun wasn't just silent in voice, she was silent in flesh. Graceful, measured, and troubled by the chaos of anatomy. Historians still debate whether this emphasis on silence was rooted more in theology or in gender norms. Male monks, after all, had their own rules, but many were known to laugh, burp, and occasionally even compose silly rhymes. Nuns, though, their reputation was bound to chastity and quiet, to purity and poise. Double the weight, double the pressure. In some convents, sisters communicated using hand signs, not modern sign language, but a kind of sacred charades. You might rub your stomach to ask about the next meal, or raise two fingers, then a fist, to signal a specific psalm. One scholar even found a list of gestures from a German abbey where a cupped hand under the armpit meant I'm cold. No known sign for I'm about to explode from the lentils, but surely one existed. You walk slowly to the chapter house for the day's readings. Again, silence. You sit cross-legged, back straight, knees quietly aching. The abbess speaks, a reading from the Gospels, then a reminder about modesty, not just in dress, but in spirit. A noisy heart is a distracted heart, she says. And everyone knows noisy doesn't always mean verbal. You think of the night before, the accidental sound, the sharp intake of breath that followed, the whispered penance during Lauds. It's not always official punishment, but sometimes a sharp glance from the abbess is worse than lashes. You suppress a smoke, not because any of this is funny, but because it's so human. This vast, complex system of prayer and ritual, threatened by a burble in someone's gut. And yet, it makes sense, doesn't it? In a life stripped of vanity, of distraction, of sin, your body becomes the final battleground. You've given up meat, possessions, even your name. What's left to control but digestion? Lunch approaches. You're already dreading it. The kitchen smells of chickpeas and boiled garlic. A lovely stew until you remember what comes next. You recall one sister, a novice who quietly left the table midway through dinner 2 months ago. No one saw her again for a week. Rumors swirled, penance, illness, a spiritual retreat. The truth, she'd had gas, involuntary, unstoppable, echoing gas. In the refectory, during a reading of Corinthians, her timing was unfortunate, but biblical. Historians still argue whether such silent codes of shame were more psychological than theological. No one really believed a fart could damn a soul, but shame is a powerful leash. And for women in faith, the leash was often pulled tightest. You find yourself wondering what the saints did. The real ones, the ones in the hagiographies. Surely some of them had digestion. Surely Catherine of Siena, who lived on practically nothing but the Eucharist and tears, let one slip. Did Hildegard of Bingen, visionary, scientist, and Benedictine nun ever write about gut flora? Actually, yes. Kind of. Hildegard wrote extensively on the four humors, including wind in the body. She saw it as part of divine balance, necessary, even healthy. A wise nun who dared to believe the body had a purpose, not just a burden. Of course, Hildegard was exceptional. Most sisters just tried to stay silent and still. Which brings us back to you, kneeling again, back to the stone, hoping tonight's stew settles quietly, because here in the monastery, your piety might be measured not in prayers, but in silence held, even under pressure. You shuffle quietly through the narrow cloister walkway, head bowed, arms tucked into your habit. The morning air is cool, and a faint mist clings to the garden courtyard like a secret no one's willing to speak aloud. Not that anyone could speak aloud right now. Silence still holds firm, except for birds and the distant clink of a bucket. And yet, even in this hush, your body hums. Your stomach shifts, not painfully, just persistently. A mild reminder that you're alive, and not made of stained glass. But in this space, being alive is something to be endured, not celebrated, especially when it makes noise. This is the paradox you live in, the cloistered body. You were taught from the beginning that the body is a temple but also a trap, a holy vessel but also a leaky, unreliable thing that smells and hungers and groans when it's not supposed to. Especially for women, especially in here. In the cloister, your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God, but also, somehow, to the community. Your sounds affect others. Your smells interrupt prayer. Your slip-up might cause another sister to stumble in her devotion. It's a burden you carry every time you eat, breathe, or exist in shared space. You recall your entrance day vividly. A hush fell over the convent as you arrived. The ceremony was solemn, your old clothes removed, your haircut, your name altered. That night, your supper was light. Lentils, bread, a piece of pear. It felt ceremonial, cleansing, holy. It also gave you terrible gas. You didn't sleep that night. Not really. You just lay still, trying to convince your intestines that this wasn't the time for rebellion. Every movement of air beneath the blanket felt like it echoed through the rafters. You'd never feared your own anatomy so much. You weren't alone in that, though. Everyone here wrestles with their physical self. The rule of Saint Benedict calls for moderation in all things, but moderation is hard when your stomach's fermenting. In the 12th century, medical understanding was still rooted in ancient Greek humoral theory. You were either too hot, too cold, too wet, or too dry. Farts, they were wind part of the flatulent humor born from undigested food. Monastic physicians often prescribed herbs to calm the vapors, like fennel, anise, or mint. You once saw Sister Petronilla chew on a whole clove and mutter something about the devil's trumpet. But here's the twist: some holy women believed that total bodily control wasn't just a goal. It was proof of sainthood. There's a story of a nun in Spain who claimed she no longer defecated at all, her body was transformed by grace. Another in Italy claimed she subsisted only on communion wafers and had no more need for mortal digestion. Historians still argue whether these were sincere mystical beliefs or survival tactics for women seeking authority in a world that doubted them. You step into the herb garden, where Sister Hild squats near a patch of angelica. She's old, stern, and smells of vinegar, but she knows her plants. She hands you a bundle of dried caraway and whispers, for the belly, if you're quiet about it. A rare juke, or maybe a coded blessing. Either way, you tuck the herbs into your sleeve. By midday, you're back in the kitchen helping prepare lunch. Boiling beans, chopping garlic, stirring barley. It smells hearty and yes, like danger. You glance at the novice beside you, who looks as worried as you feel. Everyone's thinking it, but no one says it. Asterisk, this will not end well. Asterisk. Still, you stir and serve and eat. You nod in silence during the scripture reading today. It's about Paul and the body being a temple again, and then you file out, trying to walk gently enough that your digestion doesn't asterisk shift asterisk. You've read about anchorites women who walled themselves into small cells beside churches, alone for life. Some thought they had it easier. No shared meals, no public slips, just them, God, and whatever noises they dared make in solitude. But you know better. Solitude has its own echoes. A loud cough from Sister Magda brings you back to the refectory. She's always had a heavy presence, even without speaking. She looks at you and raises one eyebrow, then pets her stomach. You almost laugh. Almost. That would break two rules at once. Still, it's a moment of grace, a shared understanding that yes, we are all human, even here. That night, you lie in bed, staring at the ceiling beams. You think about how many women before you lay here thinking the same thing. Asterisk, why does my body betray me? Asterisk, you wonder whether God minds. Some theologians insisted that saints transcended the flesh, that the holiest were those who seemed to hover just above physical need. Others argued that Christ himself wept, sweat, and hungered. Surely, then, holiness could coexist with gas. Historians still debate how much of these bodily expectations were doctrine versus social pressure. Monks had stricter fasts, perhaps, but they weren't always expected to be graceful. Nuns, though, women had to be more. Better, quieter, purer. You roll over, listening to the gentle rustle of blankets. Then a creak, then again that small, sharp sound. Not from you, a buzz, a soft sigh. You smile into the dark. Someone else is real too, and that, somehow, helps you fall asleep. You wake before dawn again, as always, but this time your mind is buzzing with a question you just can't shake. Asterisk, asterisk, saintly flatulence. Asterisk, asterisk, surely someone, somewhere in the heavenly choir, let one rip. The idea tickles your half-asleep brain. You pull on your habit with practiced grace, eyes still crusty, but your thoughts already wandering. You're not trying to be irreverent truly. You're not. But come on, if even the Virgin Mary had to nurse a baby, surely some of the saints had bodily functions too. You step into the chapel for a morning prayer, keeping your expression neutral even as your curiosity builds. You kneel beside Sister Magda, who emits a suspiciously timed cough just as you settle. A cover-up, you offer no judgment. In fact, you mentally award her 1 gold star for effort. Later, you're in the scriptorium, copying a hymn book by candlelight, when you remember something Hildegard of Bingen once wrote about the body. You've heard her called the Sibyl of the Rhine, a Benedictine abbess, composer, mystic, and chronic sufferer of migraines. Her visions were wild, her knowledge vast, and her acceptance of the body unique. Hildegard described flatulence as the movement of superfluous wind, a natural part of digestion's divine machinery. She even prescribed remedies, not penances, for excessive gas. That's right, remedies, as in, asterisk, asterisk, this was considered treatable, not sinful. But not everyone was so forgiving. A 13th century monk named Caesarius of Heisterbach recorded a tale of a novice who passed gas loudly in the middle of matins. The entire convent froze. The poor girl was sent to do penance for a week. Her offense? Not just the act, but the disruption of asterisk divine rhythm asterisk. Never mind that the Psalms were halfway through an already lengthy verse. You smile to yourself. The heavenly rhythm, interrupted by a very human note. It sounds almost poetic. What's stranger still, there are stories of asterisk, asterisk, holy men asterisk, asterisk, whose bodily emissions were seen as miraculous. One such tale describes a monk who, mid-sermon, broke wind so loudly and unexpectedly that his fellow brothers burst into laughter. He paused, smiled, and declared it a sign from God, proof of humility. That tale was preserved in several copies. Asterisk, asterisk, preserved, asterisk. Asterisk on parchment, in ink. Historians still argue whether these stories were meant to humble the lofty or amuse the bored. Some suggest monks use them to remind one another of shared humanity. Others think it was simply a coping mechanism for the sheer absurdity of eternal silence, cold stone, and a diet of root vegetables. But what about women? Where are the farting nuns of legend? Nowhere, it seems. You realize with a small jolt, the same acts that were comical in monks were asterisk catastrophic asterisk in nuns. A monk who burped mid-prayer might be called rustic, simple, even endearing. A nun who did the same might be branded impure and disciplined, or worse, worldly. Take Saint Clare of Assisi. She fasted until her body all but vanished. Her letters are full of devotion, not digestion. Then there's Saint Catherine of Siena, who lived on nothing but the Eucharist for years. Her body gave up the ghost long before her faith did. No room for wind when there's no food. You start to realize the saints who escaped the body's burdens were the ones most venerated. The ones who made their bodies invisible, those are the ones held up as models. That's not just spiritual, it's political. After all, in medieval theology, the body was the gateway to sin. But for women, the body was sin, in many eyes. Lust, temptation, childbirth, blood, and yes, gas, all symbols of imperfection. Things to be suppressed, purged, mortified. There's a particularly odd entry in a German monastic journal describing a scentless nun, revered because she emitted neither odor nor sound, as if being free from physical evidence was a spiritual badge. It reads almost like a saintly deodorant ad, and yet she was admired. Historians are still piecing together these biases, comparing male and female hagiographies, noting the clear lack of bodily mention in female saints' lives. It's as if women had to be disembodied to be holy, to become spirit, not flesh. You think again about the question that started all this. Did a saint ever fart? Maybe, probably, but no one dared write it down, at least not if she wore a veil. By mid-afternoon, you're weeding in the garden, fingers cold and soul-kicked. A beetle scurries over your boot. The sun hits the garden wall at just the right angle to make the moss glow like emeralds. It's beautiful in a quiet way, just like this whole life. Until you hear it. A short asterisk toot asterisk. Unmistakable. You freeze. Sister Agnes, bend over the sage bush, goes utterly still. A beat. Then miracle of miracles, Sister Magda coughs again. Aren't you magnificent? You pretend to focus on your weeds, but inside, you're applauding. Not the fart, not the shame, but the solidarity, the shared knowing. In a world where sainthood has no room for a sound, sometimes the most sacred act is to let someone else stay silent. You find yourself assigned to the archives today, dusty shelves stacked with brittle parchment, their Latin letters slowly flicking away like dried petals. It's the perfect place for a little quiet rebellion today. You're on a mission to uncover the truth behind something whispered about in candlelight and always brushed aside with tight-lipped smile. S*** the secretum monialis ***, a term whispered by Sister Petronilla during one of those rare crack-in-the-routine conversations. She'd leaned close over a basket of potatoes, muttering. There were manuals, you know. Nuns' etiquette, things not meant for outsiders. Then she winked, or maybe she had something in her eye. You're still not sure. So now, here you are, sifting through old rulebooks, penitential texts, even marginalia, hoping to catch a glimpse of something not meant for public eyes. And then you find it not a tome titled * How Not to Pass Gas in the Presence of God *, sadly, but something better. A bound collection of behavioral guidance for enclosed orders of women, anonymous, but inked with the care of someone who truly * meant it. In one faint line almost missed there's a curious phrase. * sisters shall guard their person with grace in all forms, in gesture, in breath, in air. * you stare at the word. It hangs there like perfume or the ghost of a joke. You read on. Other lines reference the maintenance of modest presence, avoidance of unnecessary disturbance, and a particularly delicate suggestion that any * unwelcome emanations * be confessed * if they result from a gluttonous indulgence *, which is medieval speak for * if you eat too much cabbage and toot during Vespers, maybe bring it up in confession. Historians still argue whether such passages were metaphorical, euphemistic, or deadly serious. But the fact that they existed at all, that's something. You feel like you've stumbled into a hidden script of bodily suppression, an unwritten law passed from woman to woman, inked between the lines of scripture and silence. You imagine some poor sister copying this text centuries ago, rolling her eyes so hard they almost became relics. But there's more. A tucked-in page, not properly bound, likely slipped in later. It lists gestures. Yes, like monastic sign language. You skim it, * hand to chest, sorrow, 2 fingers down, hunger, palm to stomach, discomfort, *, and then, one that makes you cough to stifle a laugh, * index finger circled twice in the air, request for a pardon of personal release. * so their * was * a signal, a whole secret communication system, one you'd never learned in your formal novitiate training. You wonder if Sister Magda knows it. Probably. You imagine it now. A silent ritual of grace and gas, a whole dance of dignity maintained by coded hands and polite averting of eyes. A choreography of survival, because that's what it really is, isn't it? Not repression but adaptation, holding on to dignity in a world that demands silence, even from your bowels. You slip the page back carefully, the parchment nearly cracking at the edges. You're tempted to copy it out, but something about its fragile secrecy feels sacred. You let it be. Later, during supper, you observe the room with new eyes. The way Sister Lucia shifts slightly before standing. The brief pause as Sister Agnes drinks water, rhythm change to cover a sound. The longer you watch, the more you see it. The quiet ballet of bodily awareness. And you start to notice something else, too. A kind of protectiveness. If one sister makes a sound, another coughs. If a belly growls, someone scrapes their spoon just a little louder. It's not just avoidance, it's defense, camouflage, mercy. Historians might call this performance. Gender theory might call it internalized modesty. But here, tonight, it feels like something simpler. Kindness. You remember the phrase from the parchment again, guard their person with grace in all forms, And maybe that's what they were doing. Not just hiding their bodies, but guarding one another from shame. A community of subtle protectors. It reminds you of the ancient idea of modestia, not just modesty, but poise. Discipline not as denial, but as sacred elegance. To walk, to sit, to breathe in a way that does no harm, not even to the silence. You almost laugh. Not because it's silly, but because it's strange and beautiful and sad and so deeply human. A bunch of women living in stone boxes, trying to reach God, while trying not to fart during the Salve Regina. There's no chapter in the Bible about this. No stained glass window depicts it. But you swear, somewhere in the sacred quiet of these halls, this little or this secret etiquette was every bit as real as any commandment. And maybe, just maybe, a little holier. The convent smells like boiled beans today. You knew it would happen. There's a 3-day cycle in the kitchen. Today is bean stew with wild greens and barley. It's nourishing, humble, affordable, and an absolute minefield. You stir your portion slowly, feeling the weight of what's to come. You're not alone in your dread. The room is filled with the quiet tension of digestion deferred. This is the battle of beans and beads You glance round the refectory as scripture is read. Everyone is chewing cautiously, almost suspiciously, as though the lentils are plotting a coup in their intestines. Sister Agnes is already halfway through her meal. Bold or foolish beans, you realize, are both gift and curse. They're high in protein, crucial for the meatless monastic diet. But they're also notorious. Medieval medicine knew this. Physicians warned of windy foods. Even Hildegard of Bingen, yes, her again warned against overindulging in legumes, noting their tendency to create a dampness of the belly, which sounds poetic but smells otherwise. You try to eat slowly, but that just prolongs the threat. You recall yesterday's discovery, the hand signs for a bodily discomfort. Would it be too obvious to do to subtle loops in the air and nod the kitchen door? Sister Lucia sneezes. A few heads nod, perhaps grateful for the disruption. Sneezes, after all, are excused. Farts are not. In the background, the abbess is reading from the rule, but you only catch fragments, words like temperance, moderation, discipline. No one dares break the silence, but every stomach is slowly beginning its descent into rebellion. You feel the pressure, faint but growing. After the meal, you clutch your rosary tightly as you walk to the chapel, not because you're praying well. Not just that, but because the beads give your hands something to do. Something other than press against your belly or make hasty exits. They become, in a way, your anchor. You call it gas speed mode, a secret term you made up. Maybe the others have their own. During prayer, the discomfort begins in earnest. You clench, you sit at a careful angle. Someone coughs, another shifts on the wooden bench. These are the only allowed movements. The rest, repressed, rechanneled, sanctified by sheer will. Historians still argue whether these daily negotiations were intentional discipline or simply unfortunate consequences of medieval diets. Some see them as exercises in mortification of the flesh. Others suggest it was more practical, just a matter of social cohesion. After all, when 30 people live in close quarters and eat nothing but onions, pulses, and turnips, some rules must be imposed for collective sanity. You remember an old legend Sister Petronilla once shared about Saint Mildred of Thanet. According to local law, she could walk barefoot across hot stones without a blister but always avoided cabbage. She knew better. Petronilla had muttered, "You don't know if the story's true. You doubt it." But the point was clear. Cabbage may be holy, but it isn't safe. You shift in your seat, and your belt cinch presses just the wrong way. You breathe through your nose. Your neighbor glances at you just a flicker. She knows. The strangest part is how normal this all is. No one talks about it, but it's everywhere. You hear it in the way meals are spaced out. How the most risky foods are served at midday rather than evening. How the night prayers include slightly longer silences, maybe to account for last-minute emergencies. You once overheard a novice sweeping after Compline. Not over sin, not over doubt, over having passed gas during meditation. She thought she was broken. You wanted to say something, maybe even laugh gently, but you didn't. You just pressed a candle into her hand and walked away. Sometimes that's mercy. Later that night, you help scrub the kitchen floor. The smell of chickpeas still lingers. You and Sister Magda are alone. She moves slowly now, her knees stiff, her back arched from years of devotion and bad mattresses. She glances at you and says, very softly, "In the old days, we used to bring mint leaves to the chapel." You blink. Wine to chew on. She says, "It helped settle things, and it masked other things." You almost ask if this was official policy or just nunfolk wisdom. But then she chuckles, a dry little laugh like parchment cracking. Also gave the abbess something to scold. Said we were treating God like a toothache. You both smile. So there were workarounds, strategies, little rebellions, mint leaves and bead gripping, belly prayers and well-timed coughs. A whole underground resistance movement of the gut. You leave the kitchen that night with a strange kind of reverence, not for the food, but for the women. For their resilience, their shared silence, their courage to carry both faith and fermentation like saints with bloated halos. As you lay in bed, you feel it again. The rumble. You breathe, you wait, and somewhere down the line, just when you think you're alone in your suffering cough a perfect, blessed cough. You smile into your blanket and whisper, "Thank you." You've gotten better at predicting it now, that ominous sensation that creeps in just after Vespers and settles like fog across your middle. You've learned to brace, to breathe through the moment, to tighten when necessary. But tonight, you slip. It's barely audible. Barely, but in a convent where the shuffle of a sandal can turn heads, it doesn't take much. The noise betrays you, just as the psalm ends, just as silence resettles like dust on stone there it is a short, startled puff of sound, followed by a silence so sharp it whistles. And thus begins your night of punishments and penance. You don't wait for the look from the abbess. You don't have to. You already know. You feel the burn of it in your cheeks before her eyes even reach you. The air shifted, not just physically, but spiritually. You feel like a crack in the glass of sanctity. After the service, the sisters file out. No one says anything. Of course they don't. That would break the silence. But one ought to glance your way with the same expression you once saw on a statue of Saint Monica. Patient sorrow. You try to breathe slowly. Normally, you feel absurd. You feel ashamed. You feel furious at lentils. In the stillness of the dormitory, you're summoned with a nod. The abbess doesn't scold. That's not her way. She simply hands you a brush and points toward the west cloister floor. You knew this would happen. Not because it's written anywhere. Not because there's an official rule. But because the unspoken law of the monastery is this. If your body betrays the sacred order of silence, you restore that order. With effort, with labor, with the brush, you sweep. It's not a bad task. The floor is cool under your feet. The repetitive motion helps distract your mind from the echo of your failure. But you can't help but stew. Not in anger at the abyss, or even at your stomach. No, it's the whole system. Why is this such big deal? You remember reading about Saint John Climacus, a monk from the Sinai desert, who wrote a whole ladder of virtues for monastics to climb. One rung was about restraint of the belly. He praised those who fasted so hard they barely produced any sound, internal or otherwise. His words were reverent, almost poetic. And yet, you don't recall any mention of what happens when restraint fails. Historians still argue about this. Was penance like yours always meant to be moral? Or was it sometimes just a form of control? A way to shape the body into something small enough to fit within a system designed by men, for men, and then handed to women with expectations twice as high. You sweep until your arms ache. When you finally finish, Sister Magda appears, quietly placing a steaming bowl of fennel tea beside you. She doesn't say a word, just nods, her version of "I've been there." You sip, grateful. The tea is sharp, herbal, and oddly comforting. It settles your stomach, or maybe it just soothes your pride. You recall a moment from early in your novitiate, a younger girl barely 16 who cried after she let out a loud belch during meal prep. She was horrified. She begged to sleep in the garden that night as penance. You and two others convinced her not to, but she still didn't show up for breakfast the next morning. Said she was too polluted. The abbess didn't correct her. No one did. There's something tragic about that. Later that night, you kneel during Compline, your body quiet, your thoughts louder than ever. You wonder if maybe the real penance isn't sweeping the floor. Maybe it's the silence after, the way shame lingers like smoke in your lungs. You start thinking about Sister Beatrix, the old nun who passed years ago. She'd had arthritis, poor eyesight, and a stomach like a war drum. Yet she never missed a prayer, never begged off dinner, never seemed to care when her body made noise. Once, you saw her nudge Sister Magda after a particularly violent gurgle and say, "Even the angels get indigestion." She got away with it because she was old, beloved, and mostly deaf. Historians rarely write about women like Beatrix. They don't make it into manuscripts or hagiographies, but they're the ones who make the convent livable. You lie awake in the dormitory, watching the moonlight crawl along the rafters. Somewhere near the far wall, a faint squeak of relief escapes another body. Someone coughs. This time, it's your turn to cover. You let out a purposeful adium asterisk. Just loud enough, just enough to be heard. Someone exhales. You both pretend nothing happened. That's how mercy works here. In coughs, in silence, in shared shame absorbed and softened by another. Maybe tonight's penance isn't a punishment. Maybe it's a reminder that holiness isn't about perfection. It's about patience, and sometimes about a perfectly timed cough. It's amazing what you learn in the ********, not scripture, not Latin declensions or the finer points of Gregorian chant. No, what you learn here is real tangible and filtered. The lavatorium, the communal washroom, is the only place in the convent where things loosen just a bit. Muscles, rules, even lips. You're scrubbing your hands with lavender-scented lye soap, standing over the worn stone basin. When it happens, a noise, not you this time, from the far stall. Not a trumpet blast, but unmistakable. And then, the tiniest, high-pitched giggle, followed by another, and another. Sister Lucia is beet red. Sister Agnes won't meet anyone's eyes. But all of you are stifling something dangerous. Laughter welcome to laughter in the lavatorium You didn't know it at first, of course. As a novice, you thought the washroom was still a part of the sacred hush. And technically, it is. But over time, you notice things. Whispers behind cupped hands, the quick flush of a grin, the occasional irreverent mutter when a jug of water splashed too hard. It's not exactly rebellion, it's survival. This is the one space in the entire convent where your body's noises are expected, almost forgiven. The walls are thick, the air is damp, the acoustics are terrible. Perfect, really. You lower your voice to whisper as you pass Sister Magda, who mutters, "That soup's marching again." You almost snort. She raises an eyebrow, mock serious. Saint Scholastica would have understood. You both chuckle softly. Saint Scholastica, twin sister to Saint Benedict himself, was known for piety, sure, but also for laughter. There's a story that when Benedict tried to leave one of their visits too early, she prayed for a storm to trap him there. It worked. Divine mischief. You like to imagine she laughed as the rain poured. Historians still debate whether that storm story is theological allegory or just a great bit of sibling drama. Either way, it gives Scholastica a kind of subversive power. Not loud, but clever. The kind of saint who might have winked in the lavatorium after a particularly unfortunate noise. You sit on the bench near the drying cloths, pretending to inspect your fingernails while your stomach shifts ominously. A few other sisters are nearby, some washing, some waiting, all studiously not noticing the occasional, inevitable omissions. This is the unspoken code. Asterisk, acknowledge with silence. Cover with kindness. Asterisk. But today, something is different. Sister Cecilia, young, solemn, and always upright as a candle, loses her grip. A sudden burst of sound like an angry frog and an immediate freeze. For a moment, the room holds its breath. Then Sister Agnes leans forward and says, utterly deadpan, "May Saint Gaspar of the Blessed Emissions pray for us all." The room breaks, not with raucous laughter. This isn't a tavern, but with soft, wet-eyed, breathless wheezing. Shoulders shake, eyes sparkle. You press your face into your sleeve. It's too much. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, you laugh with your whole chest. It's ridiculous. It's human. It's forbidden and delicious and deeply necessary. You realize something important. This is a form of release. Historians rarely write about these moments. There's no parchment record of the time Sister Cecilia farted and Sister Agnes turned it into a canon-worthy joke. But maybe there should be, because these moments are holy, too, in their own way. You think back to early church theologians like Augustine, who wrote volumes about bodily urges and sin. He agonized over temptation, desire, gluttony, but never mentioned digestion. It was too base, too mortal, too beneath him. But for women in convents, the body was never theoretical. It was daily, inescapable, and often hilarious. You dry your hands, still smiling. The lavender helps. So does the laughter. As you head out, Sister Petronilla tosses you a mint sprig. "Emergency rations," she says. You nod solemnly. "I shall guard it with my life." By the time you reach the chapel for a sext, the laughter has faded, but the warmth remains. You walk a little lighter. You breathe a little deeper. Your belly, still unsettled, feels less like an enemy and more like an awkward roommate. Maybe that's the gift of the lavatorium, not just a place to watch, but a place to be real, where sanctity and silliness can coexist, at least for a few stolen minutes. Later, when you lie in bed, you think about writing down what happened. Not in your official devotional journal, of course, just a scrap, a memory, a whispered record of holiness that came with a giggle and a blessed mint leaf. Because in this house of God, where silence is law and discipline is currency. Sometimes the most sacred sound is a laugh that no one punishes. You're kneeling in the confessional, and the stone floor is colder than usual. It's not your first time here, of course. You've confessed impure thoughts, prideful glances, even a moment when you secretly resented the abbess for assigning you latrine duty in February. But today, you're here for something stranger. You whisper, "I let one slip." During the Sanctus, a pause. Then, was it deliberate? The priest's voice is quiet, matter of fact, like he's asking whether you dropped a book, not a bodily function. No, you say, and you mean it. He clears his throat. Any sound. You blush. A little. Welcome to the *** confession of the unmentionable ***. The priest gives a small exhale somewhere between a sigh and a chuckle. Not mocking, just resigned. You suspect you're not the first. What's strange is that you feel real guilt. Not because of sin in the theological sense, but because of the shame it brought on others. The broken silence, the ripple it caused during prayer. It feels like a stone dropped into a still pond, a small splash, but the ripples reach the shore. He murmurs 3 Hail Marys, and perhaps avoid cabbage. You almost laugh. Almost. Historians still argue about the role of confession in bodily control. Some believe the church used it to shape behavior more than to cleanse souls. Others argue that it was the only place where women could safely admit to being fully human. A loophole, even. A sacred venting. You remember reading about Marjorie Kemp, the 15th century mystic who cried so loudly and so often that even priests found her exhausting. Her spiritual performances were controversial, but she kept confessing over and over. Not about gas, perhaps, but about her body betraying the image she wanted to project. It's not so different, really. You exit the confessional and find Sister Lucia outside, waiting her turn. Her eyes flick up, meeting yours. She nods, barely. You nod back. That's enough. Later that evening, the convent is quiet. Not the sacred silence of prayer, but the subtle hush of digestion behaving for now. You sit with your embroidery, pretending to focus on your stitchwork while your thoughts wander. You wonder how many women over the centuries whispered these same kinds of things into the wooden grate. Not just gas, but cramps, issues, rashes, bleeds, leaks, secrets of the flesh no one ever talks about in psalters and saints' lives. There's a certain dignity in it, you realize, in admitting, in confessing, in saying, "I am trying, but my body won't always cooperate." Sister Petronilla once told you that her first confession in the convent was about spitting during matins. She hadn't meant to. Her throat had tickled, but she'd feared she'd desecrated the air. Confessed it to Father Aldrich, she'd said. He laughed so hard he dropped the censer. That was 20 years ago. She still flinches when she sneezes. You move through Compline that evening like a ghost. Careful, measured, aware of every breath and sound. You feel almost proud of yourself. Your body is obedient tonight. But the moment of true holiness comes later. You're walking past the infirmary when you hear it along, unmistakable note from within. Someone's gut isn't just whispering, it's speaking in full Gregorian chant. A wet, reluctant release followed by a soft groan. You freeze, then laughter. Not mean, not mocking, just tired, honest laughter from a bed-bound sister mother, probably, whose stomach has been at war for weeks. A second voice joins hers, then a third. You step in, offering her a peppermint infusion and a smile. She takes it gratefully. "Blessed be the Lord," she says, "who made the beans and the belly both." You almost drop the cup. Later, in the dormitory, you write that down on a scrap of parchment. Not for your rule book, for yourself. * Blessed be the Lord, who made the beans and the belly both. Because in this place of prayer and penance, of quiet and control, There's one thing holier than restraint: grace. Grace for yourself, grace for others, grace for the very real, very human bodies that try, and sometimes fail, to behave like angels. You curl up beneath your blanket, a faint smile on your lips, and whisper your 3 Hail Marys not for the sound, but for the shame. And as the final word leaves your lips, you realize something powerful. You're not sorry you passed gas during the Sanctus. You're sorry that you felt you couldn't. You've heard the rumors for years, whispers traded at the back of the garden during chore rotations or over the hiss of boiling water in the kitchen. Tales of sisters who claimed not only visions, but smells, divine ones, not roses or lilies, but the kind of fragrances no mortal should be able to name. Scents that filled a cell and lingered for hours. Today, you're assigned to clean the infirmary, and that's when you first smell it. A sweetness not floral, not oil. Something like warm sunlight caught in fabric, if that even has a smell. It stops you in your tracks, and then Sister Clarice speaks from her bed. Voice barely a rasp. You smell it too. This is mystic rumors. You've never had a vision, not a real one. The closest you've come was a dream about St. Barbara and some suspiciously modern plumbing. But Sister Clarice, she's different, frail, fading, but strange in the most gentle way. She speaks slowly, with the kind of patience only pain teaches. I smell them when he visits, she says simply, as though discussing the weather. Not always, but after I've been sick a while. You nod, not knowing what to say. You're more used to cleaning up vinegar compressors and clots of old herbs, not holiness. She turns her face to the sun. Once it smelled like fresh figs, another time, like wood smoke after rain. You dare to ask, what does it mean? She smiles faintly. That I'm still here. That he is too. Historians still argue whether these olfactory miracles were psychological, theological, or something else entirely. Some point to hagiographies like that of Saint Teresa of Avila, who was said to smell of roses long after death. Others claim these scents were spiritual manifestations, proof of divine presence, a reward for suffering. But there's a counterpoint, too. For every rose-scented relic, there were dozens of silent nuns whose bodies betrayed them with very earthly odors. Aging, illness, digestion, none of it sweet. And yet they, too, served faithfully. No perfume, just persistence. You start to see a strange contrast emerge in your mind. The sweet-smelling saints and the real, sometimes smelly women who washed the floors, tended the sick, and prayed between bouts of indigestion. One group gets carved into statues, the other quietly carried the monastery. That evening, you ask Sister Magda if she's ever smelled anything divine. She snorts. Once, after a cabbage fast, you laugh. But she grows thoughtful. But yes, once, after Clarice had a seizure. The room smelled like honey and iron. I thought I was mad. But then Petronilla smelled it too. There's a silence between you, a soft respect. Whatever it was, it left something behind. Later, as you clean the sacristy, you find an old note tucked behind a stack of altar cloths. It's barely legible, faded ink, rushed script. A novice's journal, maybe. One line leaps out. Asterisk, she smelled like burning myrrh. I thought I was dying, but it was peace. Asterisk, you tuck it away carefully. Proof, perhaps, that even in a place obsessed with silence, scent has always found its way in. But here's the curious part. Some nuns believed bad smells were just as spiritual signs of sin leaving the body. There are records of sisters who claimed to smell sulfur during confession, only to find relief and sweetness afterward. A 14th century Dominican nun wrote of being overcome by a stench of her own wickedness during fasting, which left only after she endured the odor without complaint. Was it real? Psychological? Theological? Historians still don't agree. But the point remains, even scent was sacred. Even stink had a role. You finish your evening duties and stop by Sister Clarissa's bedside again. She's asleep, her breathing soft. The air smells faintly of chamomile and something else, something not quite explainable. You breathe it in, not with reverence, but with curiosity. If holiness really has a scent, maybe it's not just flowers and frankincense. Maybe it's also mint tea for an upset belly. Lavender soup in the lavatorium, even the faint, sour tang of humility. Because the real miracle isn't that some saints smelled like roses. It's that women like Clarice endured years of silence, pain, and stomach-turning stew and still managed to believe in sweetness. The air in the cloister feels unusually sharp this morning, like it's trying to remind you it's still early spring, not the gentle warmth the garden promised yesterday. You tug your sleeves tighter and glance toward the eastern wing, where strange things have been murmured for weeks. Sister Euphemia isn't at breakfast. Again, when you finally see her, she's scrubbing her own sandals in the courtyard, red-eyed and trembling, muttering prayers so fast they come out in hiccups. No one goes near, not even Sister Magda. Something has happened. This is *** hygiene and heresy ***. You approach slowly. Euphemia doesn't look up, but she sees you. You can tell because her hands freeze. It lingers, she whispers. It lingers in the hem. You crouch beside her. What does? She hesitates. Then, in a voice full of despair, I was unclean. I know it, and still I stayed in the chapel. You've heard fragments of this kind of language before. Unclean, The word carries weight, biblical, symbolic, sometimes weaponized. But this is deeper, something more primal. The story comes out in whispers. Euphemia had a fever 2 nights ago, the kind that makes the body convulse. She woke drenched in sweat and worse. The smells were unbearable. She tried to clean herself, but she'd missed the morning bells. And in her panic, she simply went to prayer in the chapel. In a state she calls ***. Someone noticed. Someone reported. Now she's spiraling, believing she's spiritually polluted the house of God. You try to reason with her. Illness isn't sin, but her eyes don't budge. They'll send me away. And that's the thing ***, they might ***. You've heard the stories. In earlier centuries, nuns who bled too often, smelled too strongly, or coughed too persistently were quietly removed, sent to recuperate inside chapels, gardens, or worse, exile. One 13th century case from England tells of a nun who developed a sulfurous affliction following a long fast. Her sisters said the smell was hellish. She was confined to a side cell. No more communal prayer. No more shared meals. Historians still debate whether this was health-related or spiritual discipline or a cruel fusion of both. In some cases, the line between sin and symptom blurred beyond reason. You remember reading about a French convent where a nun's persistent sneezing and hiccups were seen as signs of demonic influence. It took 3 confessions and a visit from a traveling bishop to purify her, with anise oil and 2 weeks of silence. You don't know what Euphemia's fate will be, but you fear the weight of old habits. Here, holiness and hygiene are hopelessly intertwined. A spotless soul is assumed to have a spotless body, even though every body leaks. That night, during Lord's, the smell is back. Faint, not offensive, just human. Sweat, herbs, a hint of vinegar soaked linen, and Sister Euphemia is gone again. You later find her in the laundry, kneeling in front of the copper basin like it's an altar. She's boiled every garment she owns. She says she's fasting, putting, cleansing. You want to pull her away. You want to tell her that sweat and sickness are not sin, that the body is not betrayal. But here, that's not always clear. Instead, you stay with her. You wring out cloths and light a few sticks of dried rosemary. She doesn't ask you to, but you know it helps. As you work, you think of the paradox. Christ touched lepers, but nuns with digestive issues, they're ghosts. How did that happen? You remember how St. Clair, beloved of Assisi, was praised for smelling of violets even in death, as if saintliness and scentlessness must go hand in hand. No one ever writes songs about the holy who reek. And yet, you also remember Sister Beatrix. Her feet were always cracked and dirty, her breath like strong cheese, but her hands could calm a child or coax life from dying herbs. She never pretended to be clean, just kind. She wasn't exiled, she was embraced. You want that to be the story. The next morning, the abbess holds a meeting. Brief, quiet, deliberate. She says nothing about Euphemia's sickness, only that we must care for one another more gently. That bodies are the instruments of our devotion, not its obstacle. It's not an apology, but it's something. You help Euphemia back to the chapel at night. Her steps are tentative, her face pale, but her eyes brighter. She sits at the edge, away from others, hands folded tightly. She smells faintly of boiled lavender and ash, and something else courage. When the incense rises, she closes her eyes and whispers, I am not unclean. You whisper it too. The moon is high, casting milky light over the cloister gardens. You're walking slowly, careful not to disturb the gravel path. A soft breeze rustles the rosemary and thyme, and somewhere, far off, an owl lets out a question like hoot. It's past curfew, but no one will scold you not tonight. You're with Sister Magda, who says the herbs need moonlight harvesting, and you, well, you needed the air and the privacy. This is the hour when nature whispers, and sometimes sighs, or releases. Because let's be honest, nuns versus nature isn't a fair fight. Magda stops near a row of medicinal fennel and presses her palm against her belly. It's the barley again, she mutters, half to herself. We were fools to soak it that long. You nod solemnly, though you're not sure how long barley should soak. You're too focused on your own slow building pressure, not painful, just looming. Waiting. The garden is the one place where the monastery's silence softens into something more forgiving. You can shift your weight. You can hum under your breath. You can, if the need rises, let go. You glance at Magda. She's pretending to inspect the mint, but you know she's bracing. Then PFFFT, a small, defiant squeak. Neither of you speak. Then she murmurs, the rosemary covers a multitude of sins. And just like that, you both dissolve into muffled giggles. The truth is, the human body isn't designed for perpetual restraint. The more you walk among the herbs, the more you understand. Everything here exhales plants, soil, wind. Even the moon seems to sigh as it rises. Historians rarely talk about bodily release in monasteries. It's beneath the academic radar. But recently, scholars have started to uncover journal scraps, really where nuns mention their secret moonlit walks. Most describe them in symbolic terms: communion with nature, contemplation of the stars. But once, you read a fragment that simply said, at night, when all is still, we allow our bodies to speak. Some believe this was metaphor. Others aren't so sure. You and Magda wander deeper into the garden. She shares stories, quiet and strange, of Sister Agnes who could mimic bird calls and used them as signals when her stomach turned. Of a novice who claimed she could make her digestion quiet by reciting the Psalms backwards, a theory that ended poorly. You crouch near the wild chamomile and ask, did anyone ever get in real trouble for, Magda shakes her head. No one who mattered. Then she adds, though there was Sister Elfrida. She tried to hold everything in for weeks, wanted to be saintly, ended up fainting in the choir stall. We thought she was dying. Turns out it was just trapped wind. You stifle a laugh. Elfrida lived, by the way, Magda says. But after that, she always sat by the window. The moon slips behind a cloud, and the garden darkens just enough to feel conspiratorial. Like the very earth is inviting you to be a little honest. So you let go. Just a little. A soft, harmless sound. No one dies. No demons appear. Magda doesn't blink. Instead, she grins. Nature finds a way. You think of the ancient cloisters where nuns etched tiny graffiti into stone. Flowers, faces, even jokes. One famously shows a little figure with a puff of air behind it crudely drawn, but unmistakable. A holy wind, a wink through time. Historians still argue whether that carving was a protest, a prank, or just the inevitable product of too many beans and too few outlets. But you think it's something else. Proof that even here, even centuries ago, someone needed to say ***, this is normal ***. You and Magda return to the dormitory in silence. Not the tense, sacred silence of daytime. This one is softer, forgiving, the silence of women who've walked together under moonlight and shared something that, in its own strange way, was holy. As you crawl into your straw-stuffed mattress, you feel the pressure in your belly finally ease. Not because it's gone, but because it's not a burden anymore. You whisper to the ceiling, nature finds a way. And from 2 beds over, Magda whispers back, amen. You're sitting by the chapel wall, repairing a hem, when Sister Beatrix leans over and says something so strange it makes you drop your needle. Did I ever tell you about the farting saints? You stare at her. Excuse me. She nods, completely serious. The ones who laughed, the ones who let it out, and didn't apologize. And that's how you discover the secret oral tradition of ***, the laughing saints ***, not in the books, not in the stained glass windows, but whispered through generations of women who needed to believe that holiness wasn't the same as stillness. That saints, too, had bad days and loud bodies. Beatrix tells you about Saint Griselda, not canonized, not formally but famous in legend for her riotous laughter and her ability to make others forget their shame. She once passed gas during a vigil, Beatrix says, and rather than hide, she laughed so hard the abbess joined in. That convent never quite recovered its sternness. You ask if she's real. Beatrix shrugs. Real enough. Then she tells you another story. One you have heard, but never like this. Saint Hildegard, yes. The Hildegard was said to believe the body's natural functions were part of the divine harmony. She composed music, yes. She also composed herbal tonics for bloating and once described flatulence as a trumpet of imbalance. A signal, not a sin. You sit stunned. So it's okay. Beatrix chuckles. It's not about permission, it's about remembering. Sainthood wasn't about pretending to be divine. It was about being honest and faithful, and yes, sometimes gassy. Historians still debate the origins of these stories. Some dismiss them as folk wisdom. Others believe they were quietly spread among nuns as a counterbalance to the crushing pressure of perfection. A little sacred levity, hidden like herbs in the hems of habits. You wonder how many of these stories were scrubbed from the official texts. After all, monks had their drinking tales and rustic poems. Why wouldn't nuns have their saints with bellyaches? That afternoon, Sister Petronilla adds to the lore. She claims Saint Ludmila of Bohemia once ended a debate over fasting by publicly belching after a meal of turnips. Said it was proof the body had limits, and that piety wasn't starvation. You try to picture this regal woman standing at the head of a refectory table, smoking after a bow, and it makes you giggle. The idea that laughter ***, bodily laughter ***, could be divine feels like medicine. Later that evening, while the others are chanting Compline, you hear something faint, a barely suppressed wheeze of laughter from 2 novices as a bench squeaks in ***, just * the wrong way. The note hovers, then disappears into the chant. No one scolds them. No one stops the song. You realize this, too, is part of the rhythm now. The holy hiccups, the imperfect notes. You think of the saints not as frozen icons, but as old friends with bad knees, soft hearts, and mischievous grins. The ones who fasted and prayed and occasionally lost a little dignity during matins, and didn't crumble. You lie awake in the dormitory later, staring at the beams overhead, and you start to imagine, what if sainthood was full of sounds? What if heaven isn't silent, but symphonic? Not just harps and choirs, but also the rustle of robes, the groan of old joints, the occasional relieved sigh, maybe even one dignified, well-timed toot. You laugh, quietly, but not silently, because the holiest sound you've heard all week wasn't a bell or a chant. It was Beatrix, whispering about a farting saint and not caring who heard. You're in the linen room, folding freshly dried altar cloths, when your fingers pause on one with an unusually thick hem. You smooth it flat, frowning, then find the reason: an embroidered pattern, stitched faintly in white thread, barely visible, but definitely asterisk not asterisk standard. It's a vine pattern, but if you look closely, the leaves form something strange, little cold lines, loops, and dots. Almost coded. You glance down. No one's watching, because this, you suddenly realize, isn't just decoration. It's protest, a hidden message, a stitched whisper from a woman who'd had enough. Welcome to asterisk asterisk suppressed, not silent asterisk asterisk. There's a myth that nuns took vows of silence and simply faded away, that their lives were spent humming psalms and eating in wordless piety. But spend enough time here, and you start to see the cracks. The embroidery that doesn't quite match the pattern. The marginal doodle of a snail with a crown in a centuries-old psalter. The convent cat named Sister Fartsalit, a joke that no one admits to making, but everyone uses. This linen, it's part of that same language. Later, you ask Sister Magda if she's seen embroidery like it before. She squints. Sister Ursuline used to stitch that way. Said she was recalling the unsayable. Claimed it was just a decorative cipher. A pause. Then again, she also sewed a goose into the corner of the abbess's handkerchief once. Said it was to keep her grounded. You laugh, but you also feel something stir. That goose, the secret stitches, the smuggled signals, they were more than jokes. They were survival, proof that even in silence, women asterisk spoke asterisk. Historians still argue whether these kinds of expressions were acts of rebellion or simply spiritual journaling. But the evidence is growing. In convent after convent, researchers are uncovering subtexts, messages embedded in art, poetry, even the patterns of how nuns ranged herbs in their windowsills. You think back to a chant you sang last week, Psalm 130. Asterisk, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Asterisk, a beautiful line, often whispered during personal prayer. What if these stitches were the same? Asterisk, out of the depths asterisk, but with thread. You begin to look differently at everything after that. The way Sister Lucia always lays her garden tools in a spiral on Tuesdays. The way someone arranged the loaves of bread yesterday into a tiny arch before serving them. The candle that flickers oddly in the south, I'll always relate with a slight lean to the left. None of it is loud. None of it breaks the rules. But all of it is resistance. Not defiant resistance, not war, but quiet insistence on asterisk being asterisk. Later, you return to that piece of linen and trace the stitches again. You try to follow the thread like a path, wondering what Sister Ursuline meant. One loop curls like the symbol for wind, another like a sleeping ear. Could it mean, asterisk, I heard you? Asterisk, could it be a reply to someone else's hidden message? You tuck the cloth back carefully. The next morning, in the garden, you start your own. A row of mint plants ranged slightly differently, bent in a pattern only someone truly looking would notice. Not just a row, but a wave, a gesture. You tell yourself it's silly, but your heart feels lighter, because now you know. Asterisk asterisk suppression is not the same as silence asterisk asterisk. These women, cloistered behind stone, didn't just endure. They expressed. They passed notes in folds and fragrances. They carved marginal jokes beside solemn saints. They laughed in the lavatorium and stitched farts into altar cloths. They remembered themselves, and somehow, that remembering kept them whole. You wonder how many outside the cloister think of nuns as muted statues, holy women without needs or flaws. But now, you see something else. You see a sister who coughs to cover for another, a novice who arranges her apples by feast shape, because it makes her smile, and a bess who, once, sneezed in the refectory and muttered, "Better out than in," before turning 3 shades of red. You see people. So when you return to your cell at night, you start your own journal, not in the official logbook, but in a tiny stitched sachet. You thread words into fabric, one loop at a time. The first phrase, "We are not voiceless." The second, "Even our wind is holy." You fall asleep that night with needle and thread on your lap, the tiniest smile curling your lips. The day ends, as all days in the convent do, in silence. But tonight, something's different. You sit in the chapel for a compline, the candles flickering low, the stone cold beneath your knees, and your body quiet. Not out of fear, not from clenched self-denial, but because tonight, you are not ashamed of it. You walk this winding path for weeks through embarrassment and mint leaves, shame and secret stitches, moonlit gardens and cough-covered mercy, and somehow, through all of it, you found something surprising. Peace. This is the sacred sigh. The sisters begin to sing the Salve Regina asterisk, the same gentle chant that has closed thousands of nights for centuries. You murmur it with them, your voice soft, your heart unexpectedly light. You think about your body not perfect, not saintly, not silent, and you realize you're finally okay with it. The chant fades. The candles are snuffed one by one, and darkness folds itself into every corner of the chapel. You breathe deeply, and then, in the final hush just before the sisters rise to file out a single sound, faint, humble, familiar, a soft puff of air, not disruptive, not ridiculous, just human. There's no flinch, no stiff posture, no cough to cover it. Instead, a moment later, a sigh. A long, slow, collective sigh. You exhaled too. It's not surrender. It's not defiance. It's just truth. Historians still argue what the medieval monastery was meant to do. Was it to cleanse the soul, subdue the flesh, or maybe to teach a kind of spiritual endurance? But standing here in the dark, you think it might have been simpler than that. To make space. For stillness. For silence. For mistakes. For laughter, for grace, and yes, for the wind. You return to the dormitory, where blankets rustle and feet shuffle under straw-stuffed mattresses. You lie down slowly, feeling the ache in your knees from knitting, the tension behind your eyes from a day spent squinting at thread, and the faint, ever-present rumble in your belly from barley that was boiled a little too long. But tonight, you don't fight it. You lie still, listening. Not for noises to hide, but for peace. And you hear it in the shared stillness of others, in the gentle creak of beds, in the way the night air moves through the cracked window like a quiet breath. And in that breath, you know, it's okay. You are not a disruption. You are not broken. You are a woman, in a holy place, with a holy body that makes holy sounds. You are whole. You let your breath out long, low and soft. The sacred sigh. The chapel is dark now. The garden is sleeping. Somewhere beneath the earth, fennel roots settle deeper. The lavender leans toward the stone wall, and inside the dormitory, the sisters rest, wrapped in linen and old dreams. Your body is tired, but not heavy. It's not the tiredness of shame, or tension, or silent suffering. It's the good kind. The kind that means you lived today. Fully, honestly, you shift under the blanket, hearing it crinkle faintly like parchment turning a page. Another chapter behind you. Another small rebellion completed. Another whispered victory for softness. No one needs to know what happened tonight. That someone giggled. That someone sighed. That someone let the holy silence stretch wide enough to hold a very human sound. You feel your breath slow, your hands unclench, your belly. Once a battlefield, now just a part of you. Trusted, hurt, the wind outside rustles a branch, and you imagine a line of saints not stiff in stained glass, but warm and barefoot, seated on benches, laughing softly at something no one wrote down. You smile at that. Then, you let the last of your thoughts drift out like a final exhale. Nothing left to hold in. No part of you unwelcome. Not in this bed. Not in this place. Not tonight. Good night, dear soul, and sleep deeply.